5 years ago, I wrote about the Jackson Park Bandshell for the former Windsor publication, The Urbanite. It looked like it was dropped into this park from outer space. Even today, if you walked by the structure, it does look out of place. It's fenced off, there's graffiti on the sides, there's pylons, there's chairs, and a rack of boxes that grace the stage. It feels out of place and out of time. In writing the article for The Urbanite, I learned about the stage's connection to local music history, Battle of the Bands, and the history of emancipation. In this interview, we will reference Walter Perry and the Emancipation Celebration a lot. So before I start the interview, here is some brief history. From the Emancipation Day Committee of Windsor's history accessed through their website, in August of 1932, Mr. Walter Perry conceived of and created the 1st of August celebration, commemorating the emancipation of slaves from the British Empire and the United States. In the years to come, tens of thousands of people of a variety of ethnic groups from across Canada and the United States of America gathered in Windsor to celebrate emancipation. I recorded this interview on August 29th, 2019 in Windsor, Ontario. I was going to say, let's take this opportunity to introduce yourself, and then you could talk about, your specific interest in the bandshell.
Okay, well, my name is Bradley Wade Jones. I'm the current president of Emancipation Day Committee of Windsor. Have been for the last 2 years. My specific interest in the bandshell is to bring the Emancipation Celebrations back there at some point. Windsor's Emancipation Celebrations have been held in Lansbury Park for the last several years. This past August 3rd was a monumental success, and we hope to continue in that direction and to add more to it. Again, my interest in the bandshell is to bring emancipation back there, to have it refurbished, and I would assume that it's going to be a long process, but I'm very grateful that there are a great number of people who are interested in the same objective. And we will be coming together shortly after the Labor Day weekend to see what we can do as a group to present to the City of Windsor, to work with Parks and Recreation and other groups in the area to see the refurbishment of the bandshell and what uses that it can be, that it might be profitable to the city, accessible to a great number of community groups, and of great interest to travel and tourism.
I was thinking, would it be fair to say that the bandshell itself, right, the first one and then the one that followed it, is a product of the Emancipation Celebrations, because historically in the Walter Perry era, they ran from the 1930s to about the 1960s.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if the bandshell is so much a product of the Emancipation Celebrations as something that was added to the features of the jockey club that was up there in Jackson Park at the time. I think that the grandstands had already existed in 1950 at the time.
Because I think that infrastructure was used for that racetrack, right? The jockey?
Yes, the jockey club. So in 1950, the City of Windsor put forth $18,000 to build a bandshell, and that bandshell was actually built on wheels so that it could be disassembled and moved around. And it was in 1957 that, along with the original grandstands, that bandshell was destroyed by fire. It was 2 years later, in 1959, when the new bandshell was opened, and the last recorded use I have of it was actually in 1977. And then there is in a book called A History of Windsor Parks, it says in 2002 that the bandshell was no longer in use. So it's been sitting dormant for quite a long, long time. I've done what I can to make contact to find out if it's actually a heritage site at this time. If not, then what can be done about it? I am positive that there have been previous attempts to have it made a historic site, and whether that's actually gone through, I don't know. I'm waiting for confirmation on that, and if it has been attempted and denied, I would truly like to know why and what the city's reasons are for it. I think it is a local gem that few Windsorites are aware of. In speaking with news reporters from a few different stations, they had absolutely no idea that it existed, and these are the reporters in our local area. Again, I think that there are a great number of groups that would benefit from it being reestablished. Not just the bandshell itself, once it's refurbished, once Parks and Recreation has found somewhere else to store their byproducts, cement, landfill, plants from around the city, that kind of thing, that if we can see it as a outdoor amphitheater again, it would be, like I said, to a great benefit municipally, and again, put it back on the map as far as travel and tourism to Windsor goes. I've looked and seen in the past where Diana Ross and the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Roy Clark from Hee Haw, the Temptations have performed there, that Martin Luther King had spoken there, along with Eleanor Roosevelt and her mentor, Mary McLeod Bethune, Benjamin Mays, Fred Shuttlesworth, and Rosa Parks, and Jesse Owens, I believe, had even made an appearance at the Emancipation Celebrations in Jackson Park. So it's got quite an extensive heritage, and should be given every reason to continue.
I was going to say, you brought up a really important point about making it a heritage site, and I was thinking if it wouldn't, for whatever reason, classify as a Canadian historic or heritage site, it could equally qualify as an American heritage site, with all that really important Detroit music, civil rights leaders coming in and just talking to the massive crowds in Jackson Park in its heyday.
You know, it's actually something that I hadn't really thought all the way through, Walter. I'm not a historian. I'm not a civil rights activist per se. I think my best attribute is in having a great network of these people that I can go to for the information that I need for the purpose of seeing to the continuance of Emancipation Celebrations and getting back to the bandshell, and the bandshell's history, of course, is of great importance in getting it declared a historic site, if it's not already, and to see to its continuance that it is actually cared for and well groomed by the City of Windsor, if not another organization that's willing to step up and take responsibility for that area. Of course, it is on city property, and I believe that Parks and Recreation has jurisdiction over that property. So, we would be happy to work hand in hand with the city and Parks and Recreation to see that it comes to its fulfillment, that all of that this open amphitheater and these different groups, these different events being held back at Jackson Park would come to fruition.
So we both watched the incredible documentary, The Greatest Freedom Show on Earth, and I was curious about the role of nostalgia, because I was watching this film, and of course me and my generation of folks living in Windsor will never be able to have that experience and of attending Emancipation Day under Walter Perry's era. So I suppose if I could ask, how would you say the power of nostalgia, like seeing a film like that and all these historic photographs and seeing all of the people that came to Jackson Park from not just Detroit and Windsor, but all throughout probably Ontario, Michigan,
what kind of power does that have, when people see something like that?
Well, I think that is the core and the heart of it. And the more people that we can get to see Rob Huggins' documentary, The Greatest Freedom Show on Earth, the greater the understanding, particularly municipally, and like you had mentioned before, internationally. We've already met and spoken with the director at the Chamber of Commerce here in Windsor, and he's expressed the need to be in cooperation with the Detroit Chamber of Commerce, which I'm told is the largest Chamber of Commerce in the United States. That once these two entities are also involved in what could be potentially happen at the Jackson Park Bandshell, we'll get even greater support and a better chance of getting not just provincial but federal support, perhaps state support, and whatnot, and that we'll actually see this through. Given that the original celebrations began in Windsor in 1932, it's kind of in the timeline to see that by 2032 that this has come to full fruition and rolling strong and very much at the heart of travel and tourism in Windsor.
So I know there's been other festivals and programming that's happened, including that bandshell in Windsor's history. I'm talking about there was like a Ford Motor Company of Canada. They hosted like a Dance Under the Stars or something like that.
The event was called Ford of Canada's Music Under the Stars, and it attracted thousands of people.
I think they did that on Sundays. I know there was, in addition to that, Fireman's Field Day. I know in addition to that, they had Battle of the Bands. But once again, referring back to the documentary Greatest Freedom Show on Earth, they point out that in its heyday, Emancipation Celebration in Jackson Park, it was the premier event. It had the most amount of people. It made the most amount of money, I believe, in the city of Windsor. So there's something really just powerful to kind of, reinforce and go back to that point that at one moment in its heyday, it really was the premier event for people, for money making. And then, of course, bringing in a lot of people from, different, I would say, states and provinces, primarily Black. But I also know that it was open for all people as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was reading a quote yesterday from Progress Magazine, which historically is the event program publication that goes along with Emancipation. Walter Perry, the founder of the Emancipation Celebrations here in Windsor, he said, "I want for all to know that this show is meant to bring together the Negroes with the whites in this area. It was meant to bring people together. Over the last several years, I've heard people say, oh, emancipation is a black thing. It never was, and it never will be. If not for the support of Caucasians in the United States and along the Underground Railroad, that treacherous journey may have been impossible. And, obviously it's only with the support and cooperation of other, not just the white community, but now, given that Windsor is the fourth most diverse city in Canada, and 1/10 the size of the other three, being Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, that it falls upon us to be that much more diversified in what we bring to the table as far as celebrations go, that the Emancipation Celebration may have been directly related to the Underground Railroad, but these other immigrants, if you will, have paralleling stories of how they escaped treachery from wherever that they came from to get to Canada, to get to Windsor, secondarily. Again, like you said, international influence is going to have to be a great part of this, in that we reach out to our American brothers and sisters and re-invite them back to Windsor, Ontario, to put it back on the map, to say, it's not enough for me to look at the calendar, to flip from July to August and see that first weekend in August being called Civic Holiday, when it's truly the Emancipation weekend. My goal, like I said, is to bring the Emancipation celebrations back as closely as we possibly can to what Walter Perry had built it up to in the mid to late 60s, the 50s, with marching bands from as far as the southern states, New York, Toronto, Montreal, everywhere and anywhere that people came into to bring, I've read accounts of 1 million people in this area at one time. I mean, it was the greatest freedom show on earth, and it was in 1954. The parade then was the largest parade ever recorded in this area.
I was going to ask, how did you feel when you first heard about this?
The thing is, Walter, I wasn't born until 1967, and coincidentally, 1967 was the year when Walter Perry had passed. I had experienced as a child a few Emancipation celebrations, but I had absolutely no concept at that time of what the term emancipation even meant. It was a barbecue, it was a party, people getting together and whatnot, and I'd seen it pass from community group to community group, from person to person, as they tried to continually carry on the tradition. And a great deal of the meaning was lost. So when I first became involved, it was one year that a group of peers and I had gone looking for the Emancipation celebrations with no news of where it might be or when, only to find out that it wasn't happening, to do a little bit of background on it and find out why it wasn't happening, and absolutely refused to give up on this tradition. So we started a committee of our own and got registered as a nonprofit organization, and done what we can in the meantime to find support and gather funding so that we can carry it on in even a minimal form, so that time is not allowed to pass whereby there is not an Emancipation celebration in Windsor. Even if it's very modest and meager, it happened that year.
I asked Bradley Jones if he remembers where the first Bandshell's location was in Jackson Park.
So, in speaking with one of our members, James Morgan, who did the barbecuing this year, he was, as a child, assisting in the barbecue pits at that time. And where the stage stands now, James was able to explain to me that the previous stage had stood in much the same place, that before that overpass was there, the park was in one piece, that it was immediately to the south of the present Bandshell that the barbecue area was, that it was immediately to the west of the present Bandshell that the carnival and concessions were. The grandstands would have occupied the space that are now the cement bleachers of Windsor Stadium, and that very track was the same track that the paraders would come into Jackson Park and do their lap around the track, signifying the beginning of the celebrations there in Jackson Park. Again, I've got a great deal of research to do. I started out simply wanting to be an event organizer and refusing to see to the death of the Emancipation celebrations here in Windsor. It's far, far, far too important to remember our underground heritage here, and that I believe that you would find the great number of descendants of the Underground Railroad here are absolutely in support of seeing it continue. Whether they agree with which organization is running it, or how it's organized, or what particular events happen in that year, it is up in the air, and it's not necessarily what's important, the small things between different groups and different people. What's important is that we all come behind the Emancipation Celebrations and realize this is for all of us, for all Windsorites to come together and celebrate Windsor's heritage. In the meantime, my major focus, like I said, is to get it back as close to the original Walter Perry celebrations as is possible. And I do this in respect and gratitude for my elders, those folks up and down the McDougall Street corridor, Glengarry and surrounding neighborhoods over here at Dougal Public School in that area, who, when I was a child coming up in Windsor, those elders that taught us to keep your chin up. Our door is always open. At that time, it was a very close-knit neighborhood. So even in walking from school back to home, and for me at that time was my grandmother's house, everybody along the way was either sitting on the porch or passing you on the street. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody was looking out for everyone's best interest. And, that's what the elders did for me. And though our community and our society has changed so incredibly much, I would like for them at least once a year to be able to come together in one place and reminisce about how it used to be. So one of the things that I'd like to see for next year's celebration is a tent of some size, be it 10 by 10, 20 by 20, where it is seniors only, so that you would have to be one of these elders from the community or outside the community to access this particular tent. And it's just meant to be an elder's circle, if you will, where you might be able to stand outside the circle and listen to the different elders share their stories about the original Emancipation Celebrations. And, Walter, I've got pretty much as much to learn from this as you do. There's such a tremendous amount of research to be done. This is my goal, to bring Emancipation Celebrations back as closely as I can to Walter Perry's era.
I also picked this up from the film Greatest Freedom Show on Earth, and I believe when Walter Perry was originally designing his Emancipation Day, he took historic elements of what happened before, and then he incorporated new elements, right? So, or at least that's what I remember hearing in the film. And I think that's so fascinating how there's, I don't know if pressure is the right word, but having respect to continue these traditions. And really, the city is lucky that we have kept this, we have kept that actual stage, It's not just the Windsor condition, but many big cities, they love to tear down historical structures, buildings, whatnot. So maybe if you would like, maybe you could talk a little bit about that balance, because I know you already said, I want to bring it very close to what Mr. Perry has done, but I mean, maybe if you would like, you could talk about having that balance of continuing those traditions while, of course, we also talked about paying, of course, respect to the Underground Railroad with Emancipation, but also acknowledging that Windsor it's a much more diverse city than what it was in the middle of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, and the Emancipation Celebration takes place on one of 52 weekends throughout the year. The bandshell itself could be perfectly useful between, say, May 2-4 and Labor Day weekend at the earliest. So this is the course of several weeks where it would not just be used for Emancipation celebrations, but fundraisers, feature bands, live stage performances from theatrical groups. Perhaps Windsor Symphony Orchestra would like to play an evening in the park, Shakespeare in the park. There's a multitude of things that could fill up the course of several weeks throughout whichever summer and fall that the bandshell is utilized. Like I said, it's very important to several community groups and in several aspects. For instance, I understand that the Who played there at one point. The Who has absolutely nothing to do with Emancipation, but it's huge as far as the city goes, isn't it? Even if there were a lecturer that were big enough, or a group of lecturers that were big enough to fill that foreground in front of the stage, there could be a mid-afternoon lecture or seminar on what have you. The potential is infinite. So, like I said, it's not just for us that we want to see it restored. It's for the benefit of the entire community. And I would think that the council member from the area and the city council as a whole would see the potential of the bandshell and say, yes, absolutely, let's refurbish this area and let's use it in this context. In the meantime, they're fixing up everything else around Jackson Park. Last I had a meeting with Parks and Recreation in direct relation to the bandshell. They had said that sewage work had to be done in and around the area, that of course a structural assessment has to be done. I've been inside the bandshell and seen that it looks untouched. It's clean, it's strong, it's not leaking, there's no vermin in the building, there's no graffiti inside the structure itself. You would never know the condition of the outside by being on the inside of the building. So it's simply cosmetic and some structural, given that there's overhead lights that hang above the stage, that of course those would have to be checked and probably replaced and made sure that everything is secure. I don't think you can get these big bass bins and these things that make for the larger concerts up there without checking the structural integrity of the stage. Again, things like Shakespeare in the Park has absolutely nothing to do with us, though I would love to attend. If there were, I don't care if it's a country music show, I want to go, just to be in the presence, to be at that bandshell, to be standing in the same space as all these people have stood historically. To get folks like Martin Luther King III has been somebody whose office I've been in touch with to say, how do we go about getting you back here to Windsor to give a keynote address, much like your father did, and that sort of thing. So my ambitions might be lofty, but sometimes, if you shoot for the stars, you come back with the moon. So, I'll continue to do whatever and wherever I can to get this bandshell going so that we can use it along with everyone else in the city.
This might be a strange question, but did you feel anything when you were actually inside the bandshell, kind of looking around?
It's funny you should ask, because there was, when I had first gone out to British Columbia, I was in awe of the mountains, the ocean, and just how big the sky is. And when I got up on the stage, and when I walked around inside the stage, though it may not be of the same magnificence as the mountains and the ocean, I felt something much akin to that feeling, in feeling like I was a part of something that was so much bigger.
If there's something that we have not discussed yet that you feel like you really need to say, or if there's really something that you really want to say, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Walter. And, to begin with, I'm extremely grateful for what you're doing yourself here as far as the bandshell and bringing recognition to the city of Windsor. I'm also very grateful to Kevin Blondin and Sarah Lestage for what they're doing. Their focus on the bandshell and for the city and those people who have supported the Emancipation Celebrations. I had, for a moment there, reminisced about being a child coming up in Windsor. And when I was growing up here, we had a multitude of venues. Fast Eddie's, we had the Vanity and the Odeon and the Capitol, theaters right downtown here. At that time, my grandmother would give each of us grandchildren $2 to go to the Vanity or any of these other theaters and sit and watch movies back when they had cartoons before it started and not commercials. We had Boblo Island to go over to. We had the Skyway drive-in theater along with a couple of others. We had Checker Flag Speedway. We had AM 800 at the time was the Big 8, and A&W Drive-In, and even the city of Detroit was more accessible back in that day. And I think, though it may be impossible because things change in time, and they're always going to, things grow, develop, decay, there's rebirth. It's always going to be that way. I see the bandshell as just bringing back one of these venues. We'll probably never have another Boblo Island. But by the same measure, let's not count out a venue like that somewhere else. Checker Flag, let's not count out the possibility of that becoming a part of Windsor's culture again. And they say the drive-in theaters are impractical. I don't necessarily think so. They're no more impractical than theater in the park and whatnot. So again, it's not just the Emancipation Celebrations. It's not just the bandshell. It's in bringing a certain aspect of culture back to the city that is not foreign from what its roots are. The old Fireman's Field Day, what are the odds of bringing that back? And all kinds of things that, again, travel and tourism and the city of Windsor should be extremely interested in just bringing more cultural and more attraction back to the city. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
This year, I visited Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, New York for the first time. I got to walk around the park and see these pavilions and structures that also looked like they were from out of space and from out of time. It's a phenomenal feeling to know a structure can connect you to the incredible past legacies of the New York World's Fair, and talking about home here to the Emancipation Celebrations in the mid-20th century, to the Battle of the Bands, and all the other awesome events that happened at the Jackson Park Bandshell. Locally, there are two other bandshells I am aware of. One is located on Belle Isle, built in 1950, and is named after music publisher Jerome J. Remick of Detroit. The Detroit Concert Band gave concerts there from 1946 to 1980. The other one was in Essex, Ontario. It existed back in 1945 and was demolished. The town hall was built on that site in 1967. When I see the bandshell now in Jackson Park, I immediately connect all of the magnificent history that flowed from that stage. Present-day efforts by Bradley Wade Jones, Kevin Blondin, and Sarah Lestage, as well as many others, make me optimistic that the stage will be reintegrated with the city's life and culture soon. Thank you so much to Bradley Wade Jones for the interview. Thank you to Southwestern Ontario Digital Archive, Windsor Public Library, and the Urbanite. I played Blue Dot Sessions, The Poplar Grove, and Night Watch, accessed from the WFMU Free Music Archive. This is Life in a Border Town, and I am Walter Patrician. This podcast is a recipient of the City of Windsor's Arts, Culture, and Heritage Fund. Thank you for listening. If you would like to join the Bandshell's emancipation revitalization efforts, contact Bradley Jones at edcw.ca. An update by Bradley Jones is that they have so far put together a subcommittee for the Bandshell, and they are planning a couple of fundraisers. You could also check out edcw.ca, Emancipation Day Committee of Windsor's web page.
Interesting Thursday, right?
Is it Thursday already?
Yeah, no, I asked that myself as well. I just am shocked that the summer went by, shocked that the past. Is it true when you get older, it feels like time is going by much faster?
I would think that it is, probably simply because time is more valuable as you get older, and you see it as more of a resource, and what you spend and where, and start to reassess what you're doing. They say that life is fleeting, and I think this is where that comes from.
Mm-hmm. On that note, that was a great tangent.